Hi, and welcome back. After traveling solo to almost 60 countries in the last 25 years, I've learned a lot about planning travel, overcoming fears surrounding travel, and most importantly, I've learned a lot about myself. In this video, I'm going to share with you 7 things that I wish I knew before I started traveling solo, and I'll give you some insights on why you may want to consider solo travel or travel in general. My name is Kyria, and in 2024, I retired early to travel the world full-time. I love talking about travel, hearing about travel stories from other people, and traveling. So let's get started. My first solo travel experience was when I was about 11 years old. My parents put me on a flight from San Francisco to Boston to go and see my grandmother. I loved it. I got the little wings, I got the little coloring book. I was hooked right from the beginning. Just kidding. My actual first solo travel, when I had to plan everything out by myself and navigate everything by myself, was when I was 21. I went to Bordeaux, France to work for 3 months for the summer. And I did everything wrong. I carried 2 huge suitcases, and these were suitcases I think I must have borrowed from my dad or something, because they didn't have wheels. You had to actually pick them up and carry them, and they were humongous. And I don't even know what I had in there. I carried books, I carried many changes of clothing, and I think I even carried an alarm clock. I didn't realize at the time that you needed a different plug to be able to plug your alarm clock in a different country. And I'm pretty sure that I even plugged it in once I got to France and blew up the circuit because it's the wrong power. So I made a lot of mistakes. I did a lot of things wrong, but this trip helped kind of set the scene for me to show me that you're going to make mistakes. It's going to be hard at first, but in the end, it's completely worth it. It also made me realize several other things, so let's talk about those. The first one is that there's nothing better than realizing how strong and how capable you are. When you're alone, you have no one to turn to. You have to figure everything out on your own. And that can be a little daunting at first, but once you realize that you can do it and you will do it, it's so satisfying. Sometimes it's kind of like what we term in the hiking world type 2 fun, which means while you're doing it, it's not very fun, and afterward, the stories are great. But afterward, the stories are great, and you can look back and say, I did that all on my own, and it's just such a good feeling. A few examples are figuring out directions, getting over a language barrier, or making new friends even though you might be scared or shy. Each new hurdle is a tiny win, and these add up, and there's nothing more satisfying than that. These hurdles are also present when you're in a group, but what I've noticed about being in a group is a lot of times one person will take the lead, and the other people will kind of hold back. And so that one person learns how to do everything, but the other people don't. But when you're by yourself, you are that one person and you will learn, even though it might be difficult. But it also makes you feel empowered. When I was traveling from Laos to Vietnam, I traveled by bus from Vientiane to, I think it was Hue, and our bus was delayed. It broke down actually. So it was delayed by many hours, like 12 hours or something. And I just remember being by myself, not really knowing what to do, and nobody spoke English really. And the bus driver just kept kind of shooing me onto the bus or off the bus or whatever the thing was at the time. And I just followed him, and I didn't really know when the bus was going to stop and whether or not we were going to have a bathroom or a place to eat. And it was a whole new adventure for me. When we got to Hue, to our destination, it was very late, like 1 o'clock in the morning. And I'd never been to Vietnam before at this point, and I didn't really know what to do. So I found a motorcycle, and the guy took me into town, and I even negotiated the price for the motorcycle ride. And he took me to a hotel, which could have been his cousin's place and probably was overcharging me. But in the end, I got to where I needed to go. I actually didn't get overcharged. I got to have my first ever Vietnamese coffee, which was delicious. And I had that feeling of accomplishment for figuring it all out on my own. And it was a little bit maybe frightening or hard at the time, but afterward it just feels really good. The second thing I learned is it's actually really easy to make friends. When you're by yourself, you're a lot more approachable than if you were with another person. Don't get me wrong, I'm a shy person and it's still hard to approach people, but once you realize that you really don't have anything to lose, it becomes a lot easier. For instance, if you're in a different country, you're never going to see these people again. You can kind of do things that you wouldn't normally do at home if you were more worried about what people thought. And if they reject you, it doesn't really matter. You just move on to the next person. But most of the time, People don't reject you because oftentimes other travelers are also interested in meeting people, and so it's not as hard as you might think. One time I was traveling from Cambodia to Bangkok, and it was Songkran, which I didn't realize, but that's the Thai New Year. And so basically all the buses were not working. And I was at the border of Cambodia, or right after we had crossed over into Thailand already, but there was no buses. Normally you can catch a bus on the other side of the border to get to Bangkok. And I was sitting there wondering what the heck I was going to do. And I saw this other traveler who was also sitting there looking a little bit perplexed. And so I just walked up to him and asked him if he was trying to get to Bangkok. And he was, and we ended up sharing a cab. But I might not have done that beforehand, but after traveling, you realize that everyone's in the same boat and you get a little bit more comfortable approaching random people that you may not have approached before. Some other ways to meet other travelers is to stay in a hostel or at least a place with a common room. And this could even be a hotel. You could go down to the bar and sit at the bar and have a drink and meet people that way. Or you could always join a group tour. One of the things I like to do when I first get to a place is do a walking tour. So that not only gives me the lay of the land of a new place, but also gives me a chance to meet other people who speak English in the place that I'm visiting. So maybe while you're doing the walking tour, you find out what they're doing this evening and go out for a drink with them. I've also had a lot of success meeting people on sites like meetup.com, or Facebook has expat groups, has English speaking groups, has running groups, has book clubs, and Meetup has the same thing. So I've met a lot of people that way. There are also groups on Facebook for women travelers or solo travelers. There are hosting sites where you can post that you're going to be in a certain location, and sometimes people will offer to put you up. There's all kinds of different ways to meet either other travelers or locals even. I would also suggest taking buses and trains because the people on those buses and trains are going in the same direction as you, and you could easily strike up a conversation with them and find out where they're headed and what their itinerary is. Also, a lot of the time, trains have a dining car, so you might meet people in the dining car who are also going in your same direction. Once again, you don't really have anything to lose, so why not, if you hear someone speaking English, just go up and say hello to them and see what they're all about. The third thing that I wish I knew is that people are more kind and welcoming than you may make them out to be in your head. So last year, I rode my bike around the US and Canada, and I was in New Mexico on Navajo land. And usually I would camp for the night in a forest or a bush or whatever. On Navajo land, I wasn't really sure what the rules were, and it was pretty desolate. And so there really wasn't any places to stop either. There was one gas station. So I went into the one gas station and I asked the attendant if he knew anywhere where I could stay. And he actually called up a friend of his and asked her if I could stay with her. And she let me pitch my tent in her yard, and she let me use her shower and invited me for dinner. So that was completely unexpected. It was so nice to be the recipient of that, and I otherwise don't know where I would have stayed. So people really are kind and welcoming. On this same bike trip, I had people offer me food and drinks and much other assistance. Anytime I would sit down on the side to have a snack, and people would always stop in their car to see if I was okay. It was really humbling. But this doesn't always happen just on a bike trip. When I was in Thailand for that same trip for Songkran, I got to my accommodation and decided I didn't want to just sit in my room, so I went out for a drink by myself. And I just sat at the first bar I found and ended up talking to the locals and going out, basically bar hopping with them for the rest of the night, and they wouldn't let me pay for any drinks. So that was really nice. The fourth thing is that planning is key. So I'm a planner, and if I had it my way back in the day, I would have had everything planned out. So this is kind of a caveat. Planning is key, but you also need to have a little bit of flexibility to pivot. So the first time I found this out was the first time I went to Thailand, and it was long before the internet was really a big thing. And so we couldn't really book our accommodations ahead of time. And so we arrived in Bangkok and didn't have a place to stay, and just kind of walked around and asked at the guest houses if they had availability, and they did. And it was super easy, and it made me realize that a lot of times you don't need to plan out every minute at the beginning. So on the other hand, sometimes planning can make you feel a lot more comfortable about traveling. And so I often will plan my flights a few or 6 months ahead of time. My accommodation, I'll plan a few or 6 months ahead of time as well. And I always make sure that it's cancelable, and that way I can always change my mind, but at least I have something in the books. That makes me feel a lot more comfortable. However, a lot of times you might be in a place and you talk to other travelers and they give you a tip on a place that you had never even heard of before. So this gives you the chance to pivot. So you can change, you can go to this other place that you didn't know about with no issues. So as far as logistics and planning, I kind of do a hybrid theory, which is plan and make sure it's cancelable, and then you can always change your mind. What I usually do is I will book all of my accommodation, and then I set a calendar invite for myself to check it a couple of months before the actual trip. So a lot of accommodations are cancelable up to a few days before the trip, but some of them are like a month. So I always make sure that I set a reminder before the cancelable date so that I can revisit and have enough time to change my plans if I want to. As far as planning attractions, usually what I do is I make a list of all the possibilities, anything I think I want to try to eat, any restaurant I want to go to and all that stuff. And then I star maybe 4 of them or 5 of them or 6 of them that are ones that I definitely want to go to. And if those need to be booked, I'll book them. For instance, Auschwitz, you need to book ahead of time, and the Louvre, you might need to book ahead of time. But then I fill in the blanks with anything else that's a little less busy or whatever. So that way I always have a few things that are booked, but then the rest of it is mostly not booked, and I can just kind of fill in gaps as I go. So that gives me the flexibility to change my mind, or if I am on a walk and I'm enjoying myself, I can just stay on the walk and I don't have to feel like I need to do all the stuff. And that's the other thing, is you don't really need to do all the stuff. Maybe you want to see everything in one city, and that's fine, but I've learned over the years that I pick a few things that I definitely want to see, and then the rest of it is just like frosting or whatever. It's gravy. It's icing, that's the word, icing on the cake. So if I don't see everything, that's okay. I really have a lot of fun just wandering around and sometimes just trying things on the fly anyway. The other thing is, if you're afraid to travel alone, planning can really minimize your fears. You can look up directions and download them for offline use. You can research safety and crime stats before you go. You can find out what neighborhoods are the ones to avoid. You can make a list of common phrases so that you know beforehand how to say certain things. You can look up the cultural norms. All of those things are handy to know ahead of time, and that saves you having to worry about figuring them out while you're there. Decreasing the unknowns can help a lot with the fear of traveling, but don't be afraid to go with the flow sometimes if something comes along. I also highly recommend packing light. It not only saves money, it saves you having to lug around a heavy suitcase, especially one with an alarm clock in it. And also, it saves you having to make decisions when you're on the road. So anything you can do to minimize having to make decisions at the last minute can help allay any fears that you might have about traveling, or the logistics and planning of traveling. Some sites that I use are Google Flights, Airbnb, and Booking, or you can even use Expedia or Orbitz to plan a whole vacation with a flight and a hotel and a car all together. If you don't want to navigate public transportation, you can always use Uber, or in Europe there's Bolt, or in Asia there's Grab. There's also a few other sites like that. It's nice because you can just book it on the app. You don't have to worry about speaking the language or figuring out how to pay somebody in cash or whatever. You can also use sites like Google Maps or Rome to Rio to figure out how to get from one location to another. Rome to Rio will show you all the different methods. So if you type in one destination and where you're starting, it'll show you how to get there via car, bus, train, flight, whatever the options are. And then you can go and book the actual ticket on the site of the carrier. And then you can use Trainline or Flixbus to book trains or buses in most countries. If you're still worried about planning, you can always go on a group tour. And I haven't tried either of these, but I've heard good things about Intrepid and G Adventures. Or if you are adventurous enough, you can book your own flight and book your own accommodation, and then use sites like Airbnb Experiences, Viator, or Get Your Guide to book tours each day from the location that you're in. That way it saves you having to worry about the planning, and as a plus, you'll meet other people. The fifth thing that I've learned is that nobody cares about me. One of the things I always worried about was if I'm alone, people are going to look at me. They're going to see that I'm alone. They're going to see me eating lunch alone. They're going to see me sitting at the bar alone. They're going to feel sorry for me. I just had an insecurity and an embarrassment that people were going to be judging me. However, what I've realized is that nobody cares about me. They're not looking at me. They're eating their own lunch, having fun with their own friends. They're really not worried about me sitting there reading my book at lunch. Nobody cares that I'm wearing tennis shoes and everyone else is wearing nice leather Italian shoes. Nobody cares if I say the wrong word when I'm trying to speak Spanish and I accidentally say dog instead of butt, like perro instead of perro, perro, however you say it. From inside us looking out, we think that everyone is worried about what we're doing, but really nobody's worried about what we're doing. They're all living their own lives. So I've learned that I just need to live my own as well. The sixth thing is that safety is important, but we need to take all of the news and everything that's being shown with a grain of salt. I've been to some places where the news is talking about how horrible these places are, and I've had the best time. One perfect example is I went to Colombia for a month, and at the time there were warnings of guerrilla activity, and they were basically saying that any foreigner that goes to this country is going to be get kidnapped and taken into the jungle by the FARC, and that you should avoid this country. And I went there and I had the best time. The people were super nice, the beaches were beautiful, the towns were wonderful, and they have really good fresh juice and monkeys, and it was just a really good time. I had a really good time. I even went to the Lost City and did a hike there. And even the soldiers who were there protecting the Lost City were super friendly. I know we all also have an Uncle Bob in our life who says that if we go to Mexico, we're going to get, killed by the cartels or whatnot. But I looked up the crime statistics for Mexico City versus San Francisco, which is where I come from. And essentially they're about the same. So Uncle Bob isn't warning you not to go to San Francisco, or maybe he is, but it's just people make statements based on what they've seen in the news or read somewhere, and you have to really just take those all with a grain of salt because a lot of them aren't true. So I suggest don't believe everything you hear in the news. Do your own research and just try going and meeting the actual people from that place instead of just judging a country as a whole. I've had some great experiences by ignoring the naysayers, and I'm really, really glad I ignored them because I wouldn't have met some of the wonderful people that I met without doing that. Some of the things you can do to stay safe, or you can look up the crime statistics on Numbeo, and you can see which neighborhoods are safer and avoid the areas with higher crime rates. You can also share your itinerary with someone else or your location on your phone and check in with them regularly. I also suggest wearing a crossbody bag, and this doesn't just go for Colombia or Mexico. This goes for other cities in the US or in other places that are supposedly safe. A crossbody bag is a good idea, and also obviously don't walk around in dark alleys at night. I also usually don't carry my whole wallet with me. I just get one credit card, my ID, and a little bit of cash, and I take that out with me, and I leave everything else back in my room. Number 7 is that it's very freeing to be alone. I think a lot of people worry that you're going to be lonely or you're not going to have as much fun if you're not traveling with other people. And I think this is sometimes true. I mean, I definitely have been to a place and I think, oh, it'd be really nice to share this with somebody. But on the other hand, it can be very freeing to do what you want, when you want, and be able to make all the decisions yourself. I'm an early riser, and when I travel with other people, I often cater to their needs, which is getting up later, which means getting out later, and often means waiting in a lot longer lines and visiting some of the tourist attractions when they're very busy. But if I'm by myself, I can get up early, be the first one in line, and get into that place when it's still empty and fresh. And I really, really enjoy moments like that. I think we also get very wrapped up in being busy or staying busy or keeping busy or whatever, that we often forget just to kind of be in the moment. So I think getting a chance to self-reflect and read and just be quiet and sit and do nothing is very priceless. We don't really get a lot of chances to do that in our everyday working life. I think it's good to get more comfortable in your own skin. Okay, so now I've gone over 7 things. You're strong and capable. It's easy to make friends. People are kind. Planning is key, but leave a little wiggle room. Nobody's worried about what you're doing. Be safe. But don't let fear keep you from seeing wonderful things and doing wonderful things. And embrace your aloneness. And last but not least, it's okay to make mistakes. Your first trip may not be perfect, but you don't have to have everything perfect before you go. Sometimes it takes a while to get into our groove, and that's okay. You don't have to do everything and see everything and do everything perfectly every single time. If you like to read, you can just go to Paris and sit at the coffee shop and read. You don't have to go and check off all the boxes of all the different things. Find your own happy. Don't worry about what everyone else is thinking about you. Solo travel has made me stronger, more confident, and more outgoing, and has taught me a lot about myself. In fact, I probably wouldn't be sitting here doing this video if I hadn't done solo traveling before. It's given me the confidence to know that I'm capable of things, and I've learned a lot from having to do things on my own. It's made me a better planner, and it's opened me up a lot more towards other people and different cultures. I encourage you to take the leap and embark on your own adventure. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments, and I'm sure that either I or someone else who's watching this will be able to answer them for you. And if you're a seasoned traveler, what has traveling taught you? My next video is going to be the first of my slow travel series in Lyon, so stay tuned if that's something that interests you. And thank you very much for watching, and happy travels. I've had some great experiences by ignoring the naysayers, and I really think that someone's doing construction downstairs. I've had some great experiences by ignoring the naysayers